Before we get started, I want to make it clear that there will be spoilers for the Chaotix case files in this analysis. If you haven't already listened to the audio series, I highly recommend doing so on platforms like here on YouTube or Spotify. Anyways, I hope you enjoy the video. I'd say that the Sonic series has quite the vast array of interesting villains. We've seen almighty deities like Perfect Dark Gaia, cunning and meticulous schemers like Mephiles or Eggman, and even power-hungry, cold creatures like the Deadly Six. Yet there's a certain evildoer who always seems to stir up conversations within the community. These discussions over the years have concerned the characters' turn to the dark side, and how this, as well as elements of their respective debut game overall, could have been handled with better execution. Now, of course, I'm referring to none other than Infinite the Jackal and his infamous appearance in Sonic Forces. You may very well remember all the flack he got back in the day around the time of the game's release, which was mostly because of this scene. But what if I told you that there's more to it and infinite than meets the eye? What if underneath that titanium mask, there's someone who carries suppressed emotions and a deep sense of worthlessness? There's no doubt in my mind that Infinite is a compelling, yet tragic villain, and I'm here to explain why using my knowledge of psychology. For our first analysis on a villain from the Sonic series, we'll be closely examining Infinite's backstory and material from the Chaotix case files to bring to light his inner psychological turmoils, before seeing the way in which they further evolve and contribute to the Jackal's portrayal in Forces. We'll finally cover what all this may reveal about the fragility of his psyche. Without further ado, let's begin with the Sonic Forces prequel comic, Rise of Infinite.
Jackal Squad moving for the kill. Raid the base. All of that Eggman technology is sure to fetch a hefty bounty.
How dare they attack me? I should have been building up my army instead of studying this stupid rock. Where did these... Doesn't matter. Robot army. Attack!
Take care of the robots. I'll handle the fat man.
No!
Huh? What the?
Now you are an interesting guy. I like you. How about I hire you to lead my forces? Together, we'll take over the world.
Boss, don't be tempted by him. We'll be fine.
Interesting. All this time I've been going through the motions. I've actually grown quite tired of the world as it is. Let's do it, Doctor. I'll help you change this world.
It's made clear here that the Phantom Ruby can create realistic hallucinations for an individual when they first come into contact with the artifact. These hallucinations tend to reveal a character's deepest and most heartfelt desire. For example, Eggman's dream of a thriving Eggman land seemingly became a reality the moment he touched the ruby upon first discovering it. Now when Infinite, or in this case, Zero, came into contact with the ruby, it was revealed that his desired reality was a destroyed and desolate world. We'll return to this piece of information a bit later. Zero admitted that he had just been going through the motions, and this can often translate to there being a lack of an intrinsically meaningful goal to pursue, or simply a lack of motivation for anything. For those who haven't watched my previous video discussing the motivations of the Chaotix, there are two types of motivation, extrinsic and intrinsic. The former type involves the desire to obtain external rewards like money and recognition, while the latter type involves doing something because you enjoy it or for the sake of people or things that are important and are in parallel with one's core values. Intrinsic motivation is usually seen to be the most optimal type to enhance well-being, but keep in mind that it's important to strike a balance between extrinsic and intrinsic motivations. This is important because during his monologue in the Chaotix case files, Infinite further explained that he accomplished greatness as Zero, implying that he had finally achieved the only thing he had set out to acquire, a grand reputation. And yet, it appears that this recognition wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed to obtain a more grand reputation befitting of a powerful tyrant to maintain his delicate self-esteem. This was probably the last quote-unquote meaningful goal that Zero had, and it seems to have blinded him to the enjoyment he might feel for what he does and a truly intrinsically valuable goal to live for. It suddenly all makes sense if we take another look at Infinite's monologue. He realized his contempt for the world as he began to view its people and their own aspirations as worthless, meaningless, petty, and shallow. This also explains the burning desire that fueled the Phantom Ruby hallucination when Zero first touched it. He no longer cared about anything in the world and wanted to see it all gone. This feeling of emptiness is further conveyed through the symbolism of null space, a void of nothingness, as well as the black hole motifs surrounding the astroscopic lens's power in case files. But the more I think about the monologue, the more I'm inclined to believe that all Infinite's talk about worthless people and goals was just him projecting his outlook and behavior onto others. What if in reality, deep down, Zero saw himself as worthless because his goal was backed by a reason that he subconsciously viewed as petty and shallow? This whole predicament highlights his fragile male ego, the first of Zero's many inner psychological turmoils. A fragile male ego is usually the culmination of factors such as rigid societal conditioning and deep-rooted insecurities. Males may be led to believe that in order to truly be seen as a real man, they must be emotionally stoic and physically strong, among other things. The self-worth of males then easily becomes tied to these external markers, and if they are unable to live up to them, the value that they feel they have can quickly break down. Because of the learned tendency to suppress emotions, males with fragile egos in this way may acquire destructive coping habits where their feelings can manifest as anger, defensiveness, or dominance. We don't know very much about Zero's past to know exactly how his fragile ego first came about, but I think it's safe to say that expectations from his squad, whether perceived or grounded in reality, to live up to the role of a leader and the title of ultimate mercenary, might have played a part. Perhaps much earlier in Zero's past, he was conditioned to believe that a true man, leader, or even mercenary was defined by his physical strength and reputation. And yet, he may have felt too inferior to fill those shoes because of constantly being told that he's not good enough. In Sonic Forces Episode Shadow, Zero's fragile ego is highlighted more clearly when he's first defeated. We'll see shortly how this evolves into inferiority and superiority complexes hidden behind a looking-glass self.
Hey you! You know you can hear me. You're captain of Squad Jackal, aren't you? Your squad was useless. Go clean up their mess already!
Yeah, I got it. You destroyed my squad. I'll show you why they call me the ultimate mercenary. Take this! What?
Worthless. Don't show your pathetic face around me ever again.
shaking. Me? Me? Afraid? Pathetic? Me? He's calling me weak? No, I am not weak. I'm not weak. I am not weak. That day, I gave up my own unsightly face. And I let go of the old me, the one that was so weak, so that I could become stronger. And then, at last, I obtained the power. The power to make all yield to my will. I was reborn!
Now there's quite a lot to unpack here. Zero's fragile male ego has been put under more and more pressure, resulting in it becoming unstable to the point of no return. Shadow had just called Zero worthless and pathetic, which directly fed into his fear of being deemed inadequate and inferior. By this point, he had already lost everything he had to his name, his squad, not to mention that his image had already taken a serious blow due to failing on Eggman's behalf. Zero may have reaffirmed his title to deceive himself into thinking that he was still a praised mercenary. It seems like this, coupled with his enraged outcries that he wasn't weak, became his last acts of defiance before his psychological state caved in completely. This first part of the cutscene demonstrates how Zero's fragile ego has evolved into a more prominent inferiority complex. According to Austrian psychiatrist Alfred Adler, an inferiority complex involves an individual developing deep and persistent feelings of worthlessness, inadequacy, or insecurity. These feelings can stem from harsh criticism of an individual's flaws, as well as discouragement that one hasn't come to terms with over time. As we can see in Zero's case, his sense of worthlessness is deeply rooted in his prevailing fragile ego, and in an attempt to quell all the noise, he fell prey to aggressive overcompensation. He went from presenting his fragile ego defensively while being compliant and obeying Eggman, to becoming competitively hostile, boastful, and to some extent obsessive over wanting to be perceived as a perfect being. This is backed by some of the other things Infinite continues to monologue about in the case files, where he keeps hyping himself up as something transcendent and irresistible with an unfathomable power that he thinks has his name on it. Such aggressive overcompensation seems to have begun the moment Zero put on the mask to hide his apparently weak and inferior self. I believe that this is when the birth of Infinite is truly instigated. This moment is the real rise of Infinite, and all of his psychological turmoils up until this point evolve even further and combine together to create the perfect storm for him. Over the course of the events in Force's episode Shadow and the main story, Infinite's aggressive overcompensation becomes the foundation for his superiority complex. Infinite's quite condescending to those he deems beneath him, evident from the fact that he frequently calls people insects, and claims to be more powerful and skilled when, in reality, he's probably just exaggerating his actual competence. After all, the Phantom Ruby wasn't originally his, so he's just operating on borrowed might. In fact, we're seeing an interaction between Infinite's inferiority and superiority complexes. This is usually known as the Adlerian paradox, where the more that someone insists that they're greater than others, the more obvious it becomes that the individual is trying to mask their insecurities and fear of inferiority. It all just goes to show how much symbolism Infinite's physical mask has. He seems to wear it as a symbol of authority and intimidation when it's really trying to prevent you from seeing how broken he truly feels inside. With all that said, We can now make some final connections between Infinite's character, his mask, and what we now know about his supposed psychological state. And to do this, we'll turn to the ideas of two influential sociologists, Charles Cooley and Erving Goffman. Cooley once suggested that an individual constructs their sense of self or identity based on beliefs regarding how others perceive them. In this way, other people can be seen as social mirrors, which reflect their expected image of the individual. Identity arises when the individual interprets this social reflection and may inadvertently misperceive what people actually think of them. I feel like this can apply to Infinite to some extent, since he might have had a distorted bias, causing him to misinterpret other characters' criticisms of him or his capabilities as a signal to adopt the identity of a powerful villain. In other words, Infinite can be seen as Zero's looking-glass self, his perception of what society wants him to be. The way he presents this socially constructed identity shows how he's attempting to, in a twisted sort of way, meet other people's expectations. Now this has ties to Goffman's perspective, given that he proposed that we present our sense of self or identity akin to putting on a mask. Infinite does this literally and figuratively, hence the symbolism of his physical mask. He presents an idealized facade of himself by emphasizing or exaggerating his strengths and hiding weaknesses. Yet this also involves disconnecting himself from his reality, because through tossing aside his flaws, Infinite has forced himself to live a lie, to escape his pain of imperfection without him consciously realizing it. So at the end of the day, what I'm really trying to suggest here is that the Sonic character we know as Infinite is really just a personified illusion of the real character Zero. Considering all the things Infinite has conjured up using the Phantom Ruby to throw the resistance, of course, maybe his identity is the most realistic illusion he's ever created, all due to being the target of an unforgiving world and being unable to bounce back. Even when all is said and done by the end of Forces, Infinite manages to return in case files. He still believes it's him against the world because underneath the surface, he still feels he falls short compared to everyone else. So he's instead allowed this illusion of him being infinite to feed back into the identity he has completely solidified within himself. As long as he has an artifact to borrow power from, such as the Phantom Ruby or the astroscopic lenses, the illusion that he's created to deceive not just his enemies but also himself will continue to feed back into what he views as the truth of who he really is. Had Zero's past played out differently, or had he confided in someone about how he's been struggling, perhaps he'd have the support and sense of belonging that he deserves so as not to fall and become the villain we know today. As far as he's concerned, Zero has forever been replaced. He is no more and has long been forgotten. The pain of imperfection persists, and he can't resist the power to remove it for good. That's what it takes to be infinite. And that's all for today, everyone. Thanks a lot for watching. A big thank you goes out to Empathetic Gamer and Furious Pie on Twitter for lending their voices as Infinite, Eggman, and the Jackal Squad member respectively for the comic dub. I've left links to their platforms in the description below, so please go check them out and support them. This video's been in the pipeline ever since Case Files released, but I as usual got really busy the past few months. Rest assured there's a lot more content to come from me soon. Speaking of which, I'm excited to announce that I've been involved in the production of an audio drama, The Flames of Destiny. Written, voiced and directed by my good friend Zealot Para, along with me as co-writer and fellow voice actor, the story serves as a prequel to Sonic 06, following Silver's perspective and his first ever encounter with Blaze. Here's a short teaser.
A small yet powerful vortex of fire rushed through the winged monsters. The green light in their eyes faded as they slammed to the ground. The vortex stopped on a platform across from Silver. As the centipedes turned their heads, a light purple figure stood briefly, before returning to fire and ripping through the air toward a centipede to Silver's right. The arthropod's head exploded into volcanic gore. The fire vortex bounded from centipede to centipede all around Silver, blasting each one into smoldering hamburger. Silver shielded his head from the debris as the canine monster roared. He heard another explosion. Then, the only sound remaining was that of fire splitting air. Even the whispers had been silenced. Silver dropped his arms to see the vortex escaping to the shadows of a ledge above a door. The fire faded. Then, fierce, golden thin eyes pierced the dark. The gaze penetrated Silver's heart.
You there, state your name. The full audio drama is up right now on Zealot's Story channel. It would mean the world if you guys could go check it out. If you enjoyed today's video, consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth takes on the Sonic characters just like this one. Anyways, thanks again everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your day or night. Take care.